Yes, I am ready to start the stream. I believe so. Let's do the old dial up. And then there was silence.
Tony Caravan.
You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, not what you don't. Quality, quantity, and variety. Good morning.
I cut off the rock flux there. She doesn't really care about it though, But that's the way it goes. It is it is insane. This is insane. It's a Saturday. It's Christmas Eve in July. It's July 24th, 2021 in the former United States. And I'm coming to you through a time portal. The time portal that I've been using, you can see over here. See, I'm living within a mirror. In time travel, everything is like being in a mirror within a mirror. And so it's very difficult for me to show you, but this is basically the time portal here. I brought back with me an Andy Warhol over on that side, and then a bunch of other objects dart. Yeah.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
I promise today's show will be a little bit more upbeat. There will be clearing of the throat. I got rid of the tint, so everything seems dark, black, and white, including my mustache. Why, that's the most ridiculous. Let's see if I can do this. Why, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Why, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's like a combination of Cary Grant and Groucho Marx. Jody. It's like, the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. What do you do when your imitations of people start combining? That's right, sweetheart. And it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Now think about that. It's definitely Cary Grant and Groucho Marx together, complete with a mustache. Anyway, it is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. The evening breeze caress the trees. Maybe we'll get the guitar out later. Tenderly. What in the world does that have to do with Christmas in July? Well, you notice that the sea monkeys have been replaced by an elf, and I refer to him an elf at the bar because I think I am basically becoming a drunkard. So, not to go into color too long, but I think we're going to... Oh, it's missing that picture. That's interesting. That picture has vanished. That means I have another option for a photo. Let's see what else we got here. Browse. Something Christmassy. Ground cover. I took Gilda out, which I really hated to do. I love her. I do love her. Indeed, I do actually love her. Maybe we'll replace the bar with space junk. Remember I told you this a long time ago? This European Space Agency, ESA. That's what that stands for down the bottom. This is what the Earth really looks like, with all the space junk, satellites, and just crap around it. So imagine someone coming in from like, a different planet, another galaxy. Somebody coming to save us from the upcoming cataclysm. And basically they're looking and they look at this and go, I don't know if these people are worth saving, really. Are they really worth saving? Nah. By the hair of my chinny chin chin. This is one of those round your face out hats. It's like Bowie says. This is one of those pretend we're leaving you songs. David Bowie was great, though.
Funky.
That was supposed to be this one.
Really funny. Really funny.
Yeah, you're really funny, too.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Well, here's the thing. It's a Saturday morning. I had a fairly decent night's sleep. I mean, I was up and up and up, and the cat was crawling on me, and, all that kind of stuff. I just microwaved eggs for breakfast, eggs and sausage. These were the same eggs that made me deathly ill several days ago. But I looked at the date, and they said they were best, till like August 14th. So unless it was the sausage, or whatever, but I nuked them till they became, like a scrambled egg mix, put some cat soup on it. And I'm going to give that a go and see if I make it through the show without having to take a mad dash. All right. People talk about this, in the bar world, it's the Christmas in July thing. I mean, people don't really do that stuff. I always wanted to have Hanukkah in July, but, I couldn't get people to get into that. But you're supposed to laugh at that.
Okay.
Anyway, so
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
yeah, I watched some show. Binge watch some show the past couple days. It was about some girl who was supposedly the girlfriend of some guy who was killed, one of these murder thrillers, killed people with a hammer or something like that. And I was watching it. It didn't totally draw you in, but you don't have many choices now to watch. I mean, everything is some kind of forced. Even this thing they managed to get in. I'm not going to mention what they did, but they managed to get in that thing, those things, those things that are part of the culture today that have to be in anything in order for it to get produced in Hollywood, right? A certain scene, a certain interaction. Man, that was a weird noise. As I told you, it's like, I'm awake, I'm drinking, poisonous Diet Cola. Probably will have some alcohol later. I only have 3 or 4 beers left in the house. And I don't have that many. I only have like one fresh cigar. But I've got some stale cigars. I may do that. I don't know. But before we get into that, let's get into this
Weekend weather.
to see if I've got any outdoor activities are possible today. Looks like it's currently 63 degrees outside of my studio. As I say, we're about a mile away from an entrance to the Northern Appalachian Trail, the Mid-Atlantic states. If you go west of us, it's the Ohio Valley. If you go east of us, you hit the shoreline, New Jersey, and my old stomping grounds. I actually went to kindergarten in Ventnor, which is just basically, it's like just outside of Atlantic City, Ventnor Avenue. It's on the boardwalk board game, right? That's where I went to kindergarten. My father used to have a business on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. He used to sell saltwater taffy, but that wasn't his main thing. He had a shooting gallery, and they used actual .22 rifles and pistols that were attached to the counter with chains. But they were real guns and real bullets. And you could to show you how the times were different, they were just chained there. You could take the thing and you turn it around and just wipe out everybody on the boardwalk. It's a true story. We shoot down the metal ducks. I think that's where the expression "get your ducks in a row" comes from. You know, shoot down the metal ducks. And I could still almost smell that gunpowder smell. This was when I was a child. Later on, I spent most of my time in various South Jersey towns, just south of there. I lived in Ocean City. When the drinking age was 18, I was in Wildwood. I've talked about that story. Cape May, all those places. Anyway, so we were talking about the weather. It's going to be a high of 82 degrees and a low of 68 tonight. That means leaving the window open isn't really going to cool things down. Last night wasn't bad sleeping weather in general. It wasn't one of those nights where you just sweat, right? Tomorrow it's going to be 82 again for the high, maybe a 50% chance of thunderstorms, which I doubt, but I hope for the sake of the plants. 66 overnight, and we'll give you a peek on Monday back to the work week. It's going to be partly sunny or partly cloudy, depending on your vantage point, but it's going to shoot up to 86 degrees in the daytime, but 63 at night. I don't know how that exactly works, but anyway.
Weekend weather.
You got your weekend weather. Do you have your
papers, please?
Looks like you're going to be needing those things. Look like they're keeping this thing alive indefinitely. Morning show mug that no one has purchased. You cheap idiots.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
So the title of this show was How to Be Unpopular and Lose All of Your Friends. It's by calling your people watching your show. There's nobody really watching right now that I can see. Calling your friends stupid bastards. You stupid bastards, man. People on YouTube, I'll tell you. I give you all this information basically trying to, save your life or give you a better quality of life, and nobody gives a shit. Yes, this is one of those shows where there'll probably be profanity from time to time. The stomach feels slightly like there might be something going on with that. Yesterday I had what's called a sushi salad. And my stomach was distended for the better part of the rest of the day into the evening. Pop some Tums, then Rolaids. But it was a very kind gesture on the part of the person who brought that to me. And I was very much appreciative. Still am.
You have actually opened the door to another dimension?
Why are you telling us this?
Because you need to know this stuff. And this is going to be an interesting show. So, what does a Jack-in-a-Box and that device next to it have in common? The answer is nothing. That is what's called a ringer washer. And what you did was you put your wash in the thing, the cylinder. And then that hose was like a drain that came out of that wringer. Up top were two rollers, and you put your wash through that. Now this actually appears to be an electrified version of that, because you don't see any like foot pedal that would spin the wash, or a crank around the top which would allow you to wring your clothes dry through there. And then you put them on the, clothesline. A wringer washer was used pretty much up into the 60s, widespread in the United States. It's like I said, in the early part of the 20th century, people had outhouses in many parts of the U.S., right? While Rome, but 2,000 years ago, Rome had toilets, running water, fountains, the aqueducts and all that stuff. In fact, they were like a water culture, you could almost say, about Rome, right? Everything was water. They were so, I guess, not so proud necessarily, but I mean, their aqueducts, they had so much water that they used it for everything. There were fountains everywhere, baths, toilets. And then 2,000 years later in the US of A, now the former US of A, the people had outhouses. And now there's homesteaders out there building outhouses again. I'm surprised they haven't resurrected the wringer washer. That's the wringer washer. A real antique, if you could find one. My grandparents had one. I remember seeing it when I was a kid. I remember being right next to it, in that basement of theirs. Yeah. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Mr. Elf disappeared momentarily. And who knows? Photography. I never got a picture from Trey yesterday. Couldn't figure it out, but I found this one is dated the 22nd, I believe. So this is from, let me make sure that. I think I have to, let me double check. No, this is actually from yesterday. So this is what it looked like down Carolina way. And that's a pretty nice picture. Yeah. Think about the shore, and this is nothing against anyone who takes pictures of landscapes and sunrises, sunsets, and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, it's just downright beautiful. I could have fixed the color on this one here, because this is what we called in the graphics world. The original file was a TIFF file. And a TIFF file, was a format that was primarily used for printing high resolution. JPEGs and GIFs, or some people call them GIFs. I hate that. All right. You know what Jif peanut butter is? JIF. And yes, there is a such thing as a soft G. Okay. But a GIF file would be like GIF. Okay. It's a hard G. GIF. Anyway, this was a TIFF file. Now, I'm going to try something here to give you a little bit of an education, if I can. See if it's possible. I converted this from a TIFF to a GIF, and that's why, because it was a CMYK file, and so that's why it gave us the hardness. And what I'm going to try to do is adjust the color and soften this thing a little bit somehow. Even though the image itself, I'm using this Apple Preview program, which for some reason, Show Inspector, JPEG image, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, CMYK, US coded swamp. It gives you no way of changing the file from CMYK to RGB. And the problem is monitors want RGB. And so I'm looking at, you can't see what I'm doing, but what I'm trying to do is see that if I maybe take some sharpness, no, that'll just blur. That doesn't work. Okay. CP, take the saturation down. Yeah, maybe I'll just take the saturation down. All right, save this one. Quit. Now it should find the same file, bonus image. There we go. This gives you a much better look. You know, you could look at the the skin. You know, sounds like I'm a skin hound. I haven't heard that word in ages. At least I haven't. Skin hound. Yeah, I'm a skin hound. But anyway, you know, look at the quality of like the body on that girl. You know, that's like unretouched. Right? And this goes with our Christmas in July. Christmas Eve in July. How'd you like that honey delivering you a Christmas present on Christmas Eve? Having her hang out underneath the Christmas tree. I took Gilda away to put her on there, so, you know. And this is a fairly big picture, so, you know, we can go as big as we can so that my face doesn't seem so grotesque next to it. You want to have faces as large as the image themselves. Like, I don't know if you notice, I'm enlarging the elf as we speak. But I need to bring him back down into the type, so to speak. But, you know, and then I went for a walk. So you basically, the idea is you want the head, you know, we're seeing enough skin to get the point across. This girl's got some incredible complexion, even the neck. The nape of the neck. So, did you see that, like, shaking? That was interesting. We had a little earthquake here. So anyway, so why do people lie? Lying only breaks your heart. You know, the concept of singing and the voice. Let's see, is that the bonus image? Yeah. And then I've got some other images for you. I'm just playing around right now. It's just like one of those early morning things. And here's Scrooge, Alistair Sims' version. And if anybody who ever watches, you know, if you're one of those people that watch, you know, somehow get Christmas sentimentally type of thing, and it doesn't matter, you know, Christmas doesn't matter your religion. I'm going to keep her here, even though she's in color. We're back in black and white, back in black, AC/DC. But, you know, Alistair Sims' Scrooge version was definitely the best, without a doubt. And this kind of goes back to, you know, sticks with the time frame that we're into right now. And, you know, let's see here, music, genre. I got a bunch of Christmas songs on here. Like here's a goofy thing. Make sure there's
Christmas rocks.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, you wonderful building and loan. Christmas rocks.
I used to make these things.
If you're really Santa Claus, you can get it for me. And if you can't, you're only a nice man with a white beard, like Mother said.
Now for a little change in pace, we...
And then my all-time favorite. Name that song in one note, 1 second. They can't do anything, I think, if you're just doing 1 second. So we'll like play around with like name that Christmas tune. See if I can find a good one. Oh. That was the Reverend Horton Heath's version of Jingle Bells. I wish I could play that whole one. That's a pretty good one. I have such an incredible collection of Christmas songs from all genres of, from jazz to blues to rock to country. Believe it or not, that was, and of course, Patty Donahue, lead singer for this band. That was the Xmas rapping. So, it's hard to believe that it's Saturday already, right? Don't you think so? Time flies when you haven't anything to do.
You're now in a different continuum than the world you're used to.
So, themography-wise, let's get back to our title card. How to Be Unpopular and Lose All of Your Friends, the morning show. And the subtitle of this show, my stomach is like gradually getting worse. It's great. Is It's Christmas in Summer. It's supposed to be in Christmas in July, I guess. That's what they call it. I have to change that live on the air. Sat You Are Day was my little tweet or chat post. So, how do you do this? You do a show every day for nonstop. You show pictures of Scrooge. And then you call all of the people who view your show Scrooges. Because they're too cheap to buy a t-shirt. You abuse the people who take the time to actually watch your show. Chest pain, heart attack. And you die on air. Well, then you become popular, I guess, because then people remember it. Oh, that's that guy who had the heart attack on air, right? You used to do that show that nobody watched. Yeah, I remember him. I watched the show. I watched that show a couple of times. Sure you did, you lying bastard. You never watched it. Nobody ever watched it. Yesterday was a good day, though, for me. For those of you, as we get into the...
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
I need a dish spun, some Mentos Pure White, the stuff that has xylitol and bar soap. That's on my list. I was going to walk down to the grocery store today, but I don't think I am. Because it's getting late, and I don't like to go down. I don't like to go down this, do that 1.5 mile walk with all this traffic on a Saturday, with all these people speeding by, nosily looking at you, you know. Like, get a life. It's like bad enough I have a nosy neighbor I had to build a 10-foot wall up against. I don't need passerbys paying attention, you know, to my private life. It's just not my thing, you know. Can't help it. So this isn't clickbait, how to be unpopular and lose all your friends, the morning show. It's basically an introduction to people who have never watched this show to understand that there's a different style of program out there. That some people utilize YouTube in a different way. You know, some people utilize YouTube actually as TV instead of as, you know, some kind of money-making scheme. You know, for the umpteenth time, I'm not monetized. So it's not a money-making scheme for me. It's not a job. It says product, some kind of stupid thing about as if there's product endorsements or something. I don't know, whatever that wording is they put on there. But that's just like my cup, you know. And my shirts that nobody buys, so. If I bought at least one, and I'm not lying about the stomach thing. If someone had bought at least one shirt, one mug, one book, right? One song. I think you need to take 2 of these. My teeth are bad, and I got rid of those tooth images because I just get tired of seeing them. How small can I make this so we can still see it? Sorry for chewing a Rolaids. It's either that or end the show early. Everything you know is wrong. Trying to get comfortable. I have no idea in this time traveling situation. I mean, it could be bad eggs or it could be bad sausage. I hate constantly throwing away food. I find myself throwing away food a lot. But I wonder, you know, I get all these tests. I've had all these tests at doctors. It's not like I put hot sauce on it. The other day I put onions in when I made it. I was making like what they call a Western egg, which is like kind of a omelet you mix up with peppers and onions and, you know. So I thought, okay, well, maybe there's peppers and onions and that kind of stuff. The Western omelet that irritated the stomach first thing in the morning. But this was like pretty well pure. Just some of those brown and served sausage type of deals and just eggs. Fluffed up, you know, fluffed into like an omelet. Put a little bit of ketchup on the top. Just because they say you put that on the top. I was never a big ketchup person. Catsup, ketchup. Why did they do that? What was that all about? Was that some kind of branding, copyright thing or something weird like that? Remember that? I used to see there would be stuff called catsup, C-A-T, and then ketch, K-E-T-C-H, ketchup. Catsup, ketchup. What did it all mean? This show's going slow like yesterday. I don't know. Maybe I ought to end this thing. What do you think? Oh, God. When you're in pain, it's hard to be upbeat. Boy, it's pissing me off. Can't even eat an egg. So I don't know. What do I got? I got something on my thing. Well, one doctor, when I first told him I was experiencing bouts with like heartburn, but not really heartburn, just more or less stomach aches kind of thing. He said, well, I can make an appointment for you right now. You know, what they'll do is it's like a subtle anesthesia or something. They'll put a tube with the camera and stuff, and they'll go down your esophagus in there to see it. And, you know, it could be something serious. I'm like, I'll wait and see. And then it didn't happen for a while, so I figured, all right, well, I guess it was just... I started to eat different kinds of things for breakfast. So in this case, it could be a coincidence, just some bad eggs, bad sausage, you know? Or another thing to add to the list, right? I don't know. Maybe I need a good belch. I was doing that for a while on the show. There are a couple episodes where I left out some like incredible belches. I mean, they were notable. Maybe that's part of the problem. A lack of belching. So, no, it's, you know, the idea of being unpopular and lose all your friends isn't really the primary thing here. You know, what I was just trying to get at is that, you know, I mean, it's truthful. It's obviously not clickbait because there's 0 concurrent viewers at this current time. At least that's what the YouTube is telling me. The cat is using the litter box in the background. I could be a total disaster because I forgot to check to clean out the overnight. But no, I was just thinking about how crazy and crazier things get, and how there's this idea of time out on the weekend from the madness. It's like this is something that many people might not be aware of because you would have to have experienced it firsthand or witnessed it somehow. When there's like a natural disaster, like a weather event or some kind of thing, even like a forest fire or something like that, animals, both predator and prey, will seek refuge in some safe space. You know, if it's a ridiculously bad storm, you could have predator and prey both, you know, sheltering at the underneath something like a cave or some outcropping of rocks or something like that. And while they're in that, they're basically both just staring out at the storm, staying dry or safe from the wind. And, the same it happens in like a forest fire or something like that. Predators and prey will run and try to find some safe spot, beyond the flames, the smoke, or whatever it is, and kind of just look, but they'll be side by side, almost brushing up against each other. And it's like kind of a timeout of life. Have you ever heard that song Snoopy and the Red Baron? Speaking of Christmas in July. It's about World War I, and it was Christmas, and most of the people fighting, back then Christmas was like a big thing, you had, Christmas basically faded over the years, to just become it wasn't even to become a non-religious holiday to many people. It just became, Christmas tree and, wrapping and hokey Christmas movies, right? It wasn't like a religious thing or anything like that. It became pop culture, which we talk about a lot on this show, right? But back in World War I, you had people fighting, in the trenches. It was a horrible war back then because medicine was primitive, the weaponry was primitive, and it was just horrific. I mean, all wars are horrific, but I mean, particularly that because it had, it was, it wasn't a good thing. But on Christmas, that war happened over Christmas, and on Christmas, the soldiers on both sides, because they basically were kind of like the same people, those fighting the one side were like, might have been recent immigrants from, Germany to America or the various European countries. In other words, it was almost like the Civil War, like people talked about. It doesn't get talked about at all now because they turned it into some kind of bizarre thing for political purposes. But, in some cases it was families, brother against brother, so to speak, or at least cousins against cousin type of thing, But there was like a Christmas ceasefire, And if you remember that song, Snoopy and the Red Baron, the Red Baron was based on an actual character. And it was like, Merry Christmas, my friend, But then the next day, excuse me, they went back to war, killing each other. And it's the same with these animals, predator and prey, and these weird, weather events and stuff like that. They're not going to eat each other while they're both taking shelter. And even when the event ends, they will respect and, like, in other words, give the other one the chance to get, they'll just all leave that thing, and then maybe, hours or a day later, then they'll get back to the old, predator and prey hunt thing. So it's this concept of time out, And like I say, the World War I thing and Snoopy and the Red Baron, if you ever heard that Christmas version of that song, kind of ties into this whole Christmas in July, and it's Christmas Eve in July, technically. And it used to be another excuse, like, because I did so many years, the bar scene and then publishing dining, entertainment magazines, and being in advertising and all that kind of stuff, and graphics. And, these were holidays that you really you know, they were your busiest seasons, and just like they are, are still, I guess, in retail. But I mean, it was just the time of year, and that's why everybody got caught up in it. And of course, even entertainment, Christmas movies, Christmas songs, I mean, people don't know this, but I have never exercised it. I have the rights to John Lennon's Christmas song from Yoko, because I was going to put a Christmas album out. And I have a letter on my wall at my bar. Kind of things I've done in my life. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But I never did that. I in fact, I had Snoopy's Christmas. I did get the rights for that one too. And I think I had the rights for Rocking Around the Christmas Tree, I think. Bobby Helms, that kind of stuff. And at the time I was going to do it through a CB. I tell you these stories. These are ridiculous stories, insider stories. I was going to push it through CBS Special Projects, have it produced. So would have appeared on CBS Records. I was producing it. And the reason I didn't follow through with it was that there were one or two songs that I was having trouble negotiating, but the gentleman from CBS, who's long since gone, I mean, he was old back then, and this is like in the 80s, early 80s. So I said, no, unless he's 100-some years old or something. He wanted to put on some like Barbra Streisand Christmas songs, because she had she had a Christmas catalog, even though she was Jewish. But she had, everybody did Christmas songs. They like I say, it was pop culture. It had nothing to do with religion. But I didn't want, at that time, I was like, well, I don't know if I want Barbra Streisand on there with John Lennon. And I was trying to get I was going to call it, basically the title of it was Rock's Christmas Album. Right? And I just didn't feel she fit. And he was going in that direction. I was producing the thing, and I'm going in a different direction. But I definitely wanted it to be on through CBS Special Projects, because they had the distribution. And anybody who knows anything about the music business, and especially back then, but it's still the same today, distribution is the name of the game. If you don't, it doesn't matter. You can have the greatest thing in the world, but if you don't have distribution, you have nothing. And so I was involved in a lot of different projects at the time, and I kind of let that one just slip. Which is too bad, because it would have been great. And it wasn't until years later, because there hadn't been a Christmas record, popular Christmas record out in many, many years. Because we're talking about the 80s, early 80s. And there hadn't been a Christmas record out since like the 60s or early 70s or something. They used to come out all the time. You had these things, Firestone Christmas. There were compilation Christmas albums used to come out all the time. But there just hadn't been a rock Christmas one. Since like the Beach Boys had Beach Boys had like a Christmas record once. And that was like the 60s or something, right? 60s or early 70s. So we're talking about nothing for almost a decade. Nobody has done anything even remotely down in that vein. And then it was after, the MTV thing came along and stuff, and then they did that, basically stole my idea, and they came out with that Christmas, remember that Christmas, whatever it was called, A Very Special Christmas, or I don't know what it was. And then they just milked it for like 3 or 4 different versions. People made a bunch of money on that. But that was my idea originally, and I actually have the thing on the wall, and they never were able to get John Lennon's Christmas never appeared on any of on any of theirs. Nor did I think Snoopy's Christmas and some of the other ones that I had, locked up. So mine, as everything else, mine would have been a better album, but just didn't happen. I let a lot of things like that slip through my fingers. And I don't have any regrets about it, But it's just a weird thing. Which is, like I say, it's the title of the show is kind of, the card is the card, but the title of the show is Christmas, in July Eve, July 24th. Excuse me for belching if you heard that. It's got to come out. We're all human beings in this world. And, what can you do? Really, what can you do? There's not much you can do. You just got to deal with it the best you can. So I'm trying to do the best I can and survive it,
Making up the rules as we go along.
Quasar. Via Tattoo. I haven't heard from Tattoo lately. Still making a few videos. You can check him out on YouTube. Tattoo, Tatu. And he's got some weird different sites on there. I don't know if he still is catatonic. He's got some stuff. There's a lot of people on YouTube that are really still caught up in the political, drama. But I just have, like I said, I've gotten out of that scene. I just don't see any value in it. It's an exercise in futility to me, that is. But not to everybody, and I understand, to each their own. But I was talking about this time out idea on the weekend, too. It's funny, it's, because people, it's their weekend is their weekend. So, as I basically push, they got to do this. It's funny. And I was thinking the other day, we spend this time in the summertime, it's repetitive. Everything's cyclical in the world. I'm sorry for stretching and all this stuff, but it's the Tony Caravan show. What can I say? I am what I am. Deal with it. There's my book Codex back there. Get it. Read it. Next to the transistor radio. But, in the summertime, we do all these things. It's like when they talk about spring cleaning, right? And then in the summertime, people do all this stuff. And then fall comes and winter and everything gets trashed. And then it's spring cleaning and then cyclical again. Summer, fix everything up. And people gradually, this is like the thing of life. I don't want to sound depressing, but this idea of life, at least the people who are positive, because I'm guilty of it myself, and I don't know if the word guilt is there, but I just do it myself, is this idea that you are constantly improving things, making subtle improvements. Some person may add a picnic table to their backyard. Something as simple as that. Or, pour a patio, build a deck, or fix this thing, or repaint, part of the house, do some kind of thing, a remodeling thing. All these things, you get these emails, because if you buy something from Amazon or Walmart or one of these places online, they send you these emails about, oh, here's ideas for this, that, the other, right? I know, the stuff is neat and all that, but I mean, it's just this constant, like, beating at you, trying to just wear you down to buy this outdoor furniture or this other thing, right? And so you spend your whole life, if you're like a homeowner or something like that, or you're in you're a stable person in the same place over many years. And you do all this stuff, and then you finally get it to this point where you're almost at near perfection. And then you die. I'm wheezing on top of everything else, and I'm talking about smoking and drinking this afternoon. It's like, it's like an absurdity in one respect. So much stuff. It's like the accumulation of things. We're living in this time of these tumultuous times, and we're still accumulating objects and materialistic things. People that do the thing like getting shoes and clothes and weird stuff like that, man, I can't even conceive that. And the idea that people go through so many cars over the course of their life is just insane, Literally spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on vehicles, from the time they get their first car to the day they die or stop driving. There's so many things in life like that we just take for granted, and we allow ourselves to be manipulated, and pushed into. And that's kind of what this Christmas thing has become, is this materialistic, is it gift giving out of love? Or is it one-upsmanship, or is it just this like forced, pressure by advertisers and companies that you must do this thing, right? And in some instances, it's a combination of all those things, but still, and you look at all these things, and I've talked about, this is a much different conversation than I normally have, but it's this, that's a wheeze. I actually have a wheeze. I'm dying, I'm telling you. So, there's all these things that are going on. And it just, to me, it's just from day to day, it just gets more, surreal. And I don't like to use the word surreal, absurd, insane, because they all sound overused. It's like cognitive dissonance. It's like you're just tired of hearing it. And I'm tired of saying it. But they apply. That's the problem. They apply. There's no other way to say it. And somewhere along the line, over the past 30 years, when this corporatocracy started to get its tentacles into every aspect of human life. And this international crime syndicate that, oversees these various corporatocracies that were former Western civilization nations, they just like destroyed society. But like I say, it's not to say that they have to have destroyed your life, because we still have, despite the limitations and how many freedoms have been taken away, humans still have ingenuity and creativity. That's what our consciousness is about, my book Codex. And, we just managed to find a way to endeavor to persevere, but not put up with it in that sense, but come up with a way to like beat the system in some way, right? They keep doing these things and we find ways to survive outside of that. And that really irks them, to no end, because they're megalomaniacs, narcissistic sociopaths, psychopaths. It's an organized crime syndicate. And so in their minds, there's nothing worse than defiance, right? And I would say, if anything, perhaps the title card of today's show, or the title could have been The Age of Defiance. Because that's what this is. There are people the majority of people too, all over the world, who are just allow themselves to, be fear-mongered, threatened, scared, shaken in their boots. And then there are those who are basically, defiant. And not defiant in some sort of overt way. Defiant in a very quiet and private way. Right? Self-defiance. Well, that's not really the best way to word it. Like I said, none of these shows are scripted. I just start somewhere, go somewhere. I kind of like where it's going to now, though. But this idea of just personal defiance, defiance in the privacy of your own home, or if you have fortunate enough to have community, family and community. But even individuals can still have personal defiance. And it's what's in our mind. It's like this Australian person in New South Wales, this political loon, actually got on the airwaves and told people not to have conversations with their neighbors, to avoid all conversations with their neighbors and other people, other relatives and people. Like, what, just think of like, what is she even like, what are they trying to do? I mean, obviously it's like the lockdown, that was like to prevent, the American Revolution, right? Because where did the American Revolution, the first thing they closed down were like churches and pubs and stuff like that. And the American Revolution, that's, churches, town halls, because that's what churches were. That was like the town meeting center, in the colonial days, that's, you also had your town hall meeting at that church. This isn't like old Europe where you have these great 100-century-year-old stone buildings with statues and great architecture or things that happened later on in the U.S. as they built these things. Now, in the early colonial days, you had this, building that they usually had a preacher or a pastor or a priest, whatever. And that's usually was the same building where if there was a town meeting, it would be held at that building, that place, colonial days. And outside of that, it would have been at, at these pubs, these roadside pubs. And a lot of people don't know this, but, and particularly the area where, not so far from where I am, well, actually, not so far from here was also the Trail of Tears, which was one of the most tragic things to happen in the early days of the U.S. But there used to be roadhouses, that term roadhouse. I'm not talking about Patrick Swayze either. And the idea was that people were able to walk or ride a horse. And so every mile or so, literally that close together, every so many miles, not, distance, walkable distances, but every couple of miles or so, there would be a roadhouse, and the roadhouse might have attached to it a stable, and upstairs there might be a couple of rooms, or it might just be a stable. But it was a pub, and you could get some kind of gruel in there, you could probably get some soup, bread, and, whatever. And so people would travel, and so you could, get water for your horses, place for them, to rest, and you could rest as you went on your journey. In fact, many of the people involved in the early Continental Congress and stuff, that's how they traveled from one state to get to Philadelphia. They just, that's what you did. There was no other way to get there. You rode a horse, a carriage, or you walked. People walked. And, it's interesting, And in a way, it's a pity that's gone, Now you see in highways, I don't know if they even have them anymore, but there was a time for a while, I remember, that at the entrance to highways, no pedestrian, traffic. And someone said, well, whoa, yeah, you don't want people walking on a highway, they'll get killed. But the idea is that it didn't have to be that way. What they were basically trying to say is that, no, we don't want you walking. It's like why mass transportation never took off in the U.S. It's like the car, the automobile, the corporatocracy, the automobile associations, or whatever you want to call them, they pretty much invaded all the city councils and all these, all the politicians. And they made sure that they, put the kibosh on anybody, any area that was trying to put in a rail line, or made sure that there weren't walkways along a highway. Right? It's interesting stuff. It's funny because, when you're constructing a thing, you have the opportunity to do many things. In the early days of construction that don't cost, at the construction phase, those things don't make that much of a difference. But after the fact, it's virtually, the cost would be astronomical. It's like I always said that, when you look at this, if you look at the international or the national highways, that was like Eisenhower was the guy who really pushed that, under the Eisenhower administration. And hoping this Rolaids is going to save me so I can finish this show. Because I like where it's going. But when Eisenhower did this, and you think of these big, long stretches of road, like Interstate 80, literally runs across the country, or, down in the southern route, 40, 10, old Route 66, of course. But I mean, I'm talking about these big interstates, because Route 66 kind of was funky. It went through all kinds of like really, crazy places.
Funky.
Yeah. And, and then is it 90 or something? Like, what's the one that goes from like New England down to Florida, the Disney Highway or whatever. I've been on that. I've taken that road, whatever that is. I forget. So I'm not going to look it up. You know what it is. If you don't, there's one there. But when you're on those roads, you know what they look like. And what it is they all look pretty much similar, at least on major stretches of them. There are areas that they're not what I'm about to say, but major stretches of them are usually like 2 lanes on one side that's really a 4-lane. It's really 4-lane road, because if you really look at like 80 when you're going west, on some of these roads, and I've traveled all these roads, and in many instances, so you got one way, and it's, so less likely to be in an accident. It's just a one-way road. But it's almost like 4 lanes, because there's almost like an area on the left and the right, but at least on the right where you can pull over that fits another car. And when they're doing construction, it's like you end up riding on that, median side, whatever they call it. And at certain parts, like places where they'll have bridges or interchanges, how people get on and off of the road. Both roads, you can see the traffic on the other side, but it's separated by this median thing, which is usually some grassy area. And then there's guardrails, but in between it, there's this big space that's almost the length of 2 lanes. And that goes under the bridge that these roads pass through. And I've always said that, it would be so easy to just put rail lines in those center areas on these interstates, at least in the areas where, where they are that way. And there are lots of areas where they're like that. And they usually, are involved in these interchange areas too. So in other words, you would be able to get on a train at some point on one of these international, highways, right? Interstate highways. And take a train for, 300 miles or 500 miles, something, a ridiculous amount distance. I mean, there's an Amtrak route that runs the northern route of the U.S. And then goes south. I mean, you can't, but that takes forever, But it's not the same. It's not what I'm really talking about. I'm saying that they could have interconnected a lot of cities using the interstate system. And the other thing they could do, which is beyond their even comprehension, because they just think, oh, everyone's got to have a car, right? In New York now, that they have like bike lanes, and they do that a lot in different parts of the country. There's like a bike lane in the city streets and stuff. But it's like, I don't know why on the other side of the guardrail, when they were building these things, why they couldn't have made a walk lane, slash bike lane if they wanted to, but at least a walk lane. And it could be on the other side of the guardrail. And at the time of construction, that wouldn't have made much of a difference. You see, the width of a person, But they didn't want people walking. They didn't want people taking a train from one town to another. Instead, they ripped up the railroad tracks, or turned the trains into freight trains only, and took what the railroad stations, I mentioned this before in a previous video, the train stations that used to be there, and they sold them off, and most of them became things like the train station restaurant. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen that kind of thing. Or the building becomes some, community building or some stupid thing. And that was a concerted effort with pressure by the automotive industry to prevent people from using mass transportation or let alone walking. They wanted to end the idea of the roadhouse idea and the idea of people just going. I remember telling my parents years ago, when I was living in a different part of the state from where they lived, and things have changed drastically since then. I mean, my father passed on. My mother lives in a different state. Not. But I said at one point, I said, I wish I could just take a walk. It would have been like, I don't know, 400 mile walk or something like that. I don't know. But it would have been cool to do. But you can't do it. I talk about the entrance to the Appalachian Trail, and I'm not an Appalachian Trail hiker. Okay. So it just happened to be I'm about an hour away from one of the entrances of it. But it's like, no, I don't want to hike the mountain. They should, you should be able to just take an existing cleared way and walk, and walk if you wanted to. It's like kind of weird, when you think about it. It's weird in two ways. There are certain people who would listen to this and said, like, that guy's weird. Who wants a walk? But there's other people that maybe are on track with what I'm saying and go like, yeah, that is weird, but it's not weird. What they did was it's intentional. They didn't want us to walk. Or ride a bike or whatever, or a horse. It's funny, if the grid goes down, and it looks like it probably will, those people who have, barns and horses and stuff like that are going to be the only people who are able to get over, longer distances, at a faster clip, or go from town to town. Because they'll have horses, and they know horses, and they are farriers, and they could put horseshoes on, and they know how to take care of a horse and what a horse's need is, as far as water and food and when it needs to rest and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's those people that know horses who may, maybe the salvation of many, It's just a weird little thing, It's just a side thing. I like talking about things that nobody talks about, like nobody thinks about, just to get your mind going in it, Because we're so pigeonholed with the education, indoctrination, and propaganda system right now. And I guess this whole thing started off with this timeout idea. That it's like the weekend, so people are out there doing the old, mowing their little golf course outside their house, their front lawn, their back lawn. Yeah. Taking time off, maybe grilling, maybe visiting. But in like individuals, people who are working stiff, so to speak, they're just trying to catch up on cleaning up the house, doing the laundry, going grocery shopping, getting some things they need and whatever. So like one of their so-called weekend off days is spent pretty much in, just catching up from the work week and preparing for the coming work week. Which is probably another reason, because I talk about this often. I always hated that people went out at like 10 o'clock at night. Because even when I used to go out, I'd want to go out at 7 or something. Definitely no later than 8, but 7-ish. Grab some dinner, and if it was a night out, I wanted to go out early. And you'd go out, and there'd be nobody there. I mean, it was always good because you got the prime bar stool or the prime booth because there's nobody in the bar. And you also get to stake out the whole place as everybody enters, so it's an interesting phenomenon. But still, the idea is the activity didn't really pick up until like 11-ish. And the reason is these people had all these things to do, But I've always been one that even when I was a working stiff, so to speak, I was always one to get up early, and take care of things and try to be efficient. That's my idea, is always to do a thing that makes a thing either obsolete or, so efficient that you don't have to waste a lot of time at it. Whereas most people don't think that way. They just do these repetitive tasks and they're not trying to improve. It's the idea of each society building upon, each generation building upon the next, as I mentioned yesterday. You don't see an awful lot of that. In fact, you see a lot of wheezing, man. I can't believe it. I don't know if you can hear that in the microphone. It's pretty weird. But I guess it's better than clearing my throat. It's like instead of clearing my throat a million times today, I'm wheezing kind of. I don't know what that is. It's almost like got a whistle in the mouth. They used to have those things you could buy. You put it in the top of your mouth and you can make some kind of weird whistle out of it. Just thought of that. Or some other thing you could buy in a novelty shop. Or from the back of a comic book. But that goes in line with sea monkeys. See, they're still there. We won't take them away. But yeah, we don't see a lot of that. So we kind of it's like Devo, it's de-evolution. And we de-evolved so much at this point that people are just, functionally illiterate. People are graduating not just high school, but college, and they're functionally illiterate. According to the education department of the United States, the official website. That's where we pulled that word on this show by pulling up a government website, and they actually had a study where they were, had done a study showing that graduates were functionally illiterate. And so when you have a functionally illiterate populace, it's very easy to propagandize or to fearmonger them or to push anything you want to on them. because they just don't have this, these open minds that, and that's what I try to do with this, like I say, with this show. I'm throwing weird stuff out at you, but it's the idea that it's stuff that nobody's talking about, or that you haven't heard in a long time maybe, or you only ever heard in passing, but that gets your mind to think differently. There's this thing they call neural plasticity, which means that your brain, your bioelectric brain, this has nothing to do with your consciousness or your soul, so to speak. This just has to do with your bioelectric brain, that jello mold inside your skull. Doesn't have to be in a state of stasis, which is a weird way of saying it. So that as you learn different things, do different things, break the mold, the jello mold, so to speak, there's this thing called neural plasticity, which means you can open up different pathways and different ways of thinking and doing or problem solving and things like that. And the corporatocracy doesn't, and the education system, and I'm very disrespectful towards teachers intentionally, because they go along with this because they're only worried about hanging in there long enough to get their pensions or to keep their jobs so that they can make the payments on their house and cars. You see? And that's the problem in a highly materialistic, overpriced society. That people are compelled to compromise their morals, their ethics, for the sake of preserving their way of life, but not a way of life that would mean something like freedom, justice, compassion, that sort of way of life. No, a way of life of property ownership and pension to maintain material things. Yeah. And that's how we got into the pickle we're in with the education system in this country, which led to functional illiteracy and the ability to propagandize and to control and manipulate literally hundreds of millions of people. And this same process goes, all around the world. Some societies, just because of the nature of their education system not being up to the standards that the U.S. used to be, because the standards of the U.S. education system today is pretty bad. But there are other countries that never even made it up to our standards because of they were kept down intentionally by this power elite organized crime syndicate, right, that kept these so-called developing nations down, right? Because they didn't know how to deal with and don't know how to deal with 8 billion people. So the only way a couple thousand megalomaniacs, narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopaths can rule over and maintain their wealth and power is to control billions and billions of people and keep them at some level of functional illiteracy to fall for whatever, bullshit. There's no other better word to explain that they can lay out on them. This fear mongering. Think about it. I mean, it's not it's not hard to think about. It's not hard to understand. I mean, it's like the Occam's razor thing. There's not really there's no alternative answer to that. This is what is being done, right? Okay. There are, you know, when you see Davos, when you see that event covered on Bloomberg or CNBC or some Fox Business or whatever financial network covers this big red carpet event where the World Economic Forum gets together and decides they're going to have the Great Reset, you know, that's big news. Sky News, BBC, everybody covers it. It's in the papers. It's all over the place. It's a real thing. And those people are only number in the thousands, including their minions. But there's 8 billion people on the planet, basically. So how does a couple thousand people decide the fate of 8 billion people? And why do 8 billion people allow these sick, inbred, megalomaniac, narcissistic, sociopathic psychopaths to tell us how to live, what to do, where to go, what, in other words, control and manipulate our everyday lives. It's not funny. I mean, it is laughable in a very depressing way. That's a depressing laugh. That's what's going on. You know, there's no other answer. They don't have our interest. These people don't have our best interest in mind, our health or anything. They're corporations. Remember, their responsibility, their bylaws state that they have to just have, make their corporation profitable for their shareholders. That's their goal in life. These are people that own yachts and private jets. So you think they care about climate, about CO2, right? There's no way you're going to run a private jet, on electricity. Okay? They've experimented with solar planes and stuff like that. They're ridiculous looking toys. They look like the Wright brothers' first plane. Right? So basically what they look like. Orville, right? It looks like the first Wright brothers plane from 100 some years ago. That's the joke of it. And these giant yachts? No. That's not running like some Tesla car. Right. But people can't see this because they're functionally illiterate. And they take the weekends off when they could have a chance to think about things like this. Right. And instead, they spend, part of the day mowing their frickin' lawns, doing laundry, spraying poisonous bug spray around the house that causes cancer, gets into the water systems. Right? Gets into your neighbor's garden and their tomatoes, and they bite into a tomato and they're getting carcinogens. Or going to the box stores and buying these things so they could have a cookout, fire pit in their backyard, sit there and toast marshmallows. Right? Make s'mores. Right? And then maybe go out late at night and have one night out on the weekend. Right? If they're lucky, get screwed. Right? Instead of, getting screwed every night. I'll tell you, it's pretty crazy, when you think about it, the way people are. And that's what our planet really looks like. European Space Agency down the bottom, ESA. Yeah. Space junk. Crazy. Absolutely nuts. Yeah, and then you gotta wash their clothes too. I know people who still go to the laundromat. You know, a lot of people still have to go to the laundromat, people who live in apartments and stuff. You know, it's sickening, you know, that there are so many apartment complexes out there that are highly priced, overpriced. And again, this is like I was talking about when they built the highway systems. You know, what does it take to, when you're building it, to put a washer and dryer in a unit? Now, when I lived in apartments, I lived like one of my first overpriced apartments I lived in, and you know, and this was an overpriced. I lived in the main line outside of Philadelphia one time, and I had an apartment there. The apartment had a fireplace, a balcony. You know, it was nice. It was like a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath place, but in the half bath, so to speak, which is really a water closet. No, actually, that was 2 full baths. There was a shower in there. That was like there were 2 baths in there. In the second bath, there was a stackable washer and dryer. And they weren't the toys like you see sometimes, you know, these like, you know, half, you know, tiny ones. They were 2 full-size washers. It was a full-size washer and a full-size dryer stacked on top of each other. So when you were in that apartment, you basically had everything you need. It was a house for all practical purposes. It was a 2-bedroom house for all practical purposes. Now, this was in the early 80s or sometime, maybe the mid 80s, actually. It was the mid 80s. I was married at the time. Or got married around that time is what happened. And you know, it literally had a fireplace, a balcony, a washer and dryer, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, a dining room, kitchen, you know. Now, of course, it cost about $800 or $900 a month back in the mid 80s. Imagine that with inflation today. They must be like $2,000, $3,000 units if they still survived. I don't know. Maybe they had to rebuild them. But that was a brick building, I remember. Had a health club and all that other kind of stuff. And it was walking distance, really close walking distance to the commuter trains that went into Center City, Philadelphia. And I had a job. I worked in Philly down in the... down around like 3rd Street, you know, so that was right near, during lunchtime, I could walk over to see, you know, to like where the Liberty Bell is, you know, old Philadelphia type. You know, I've stood next to the Liberty Bell many times. Yeah, I've had some interesting adventures. But in areas like that, at least they, you know, they had the common sense, you know, so they had the commuter lines and, you know, and the apartments were real apartments. But, you know, there's people out there paying like ridiculous rents and they have to go to a laundromat. Imagine that. Washing your clothes in something that somebody else, who knows who, what they did, what they washed. And all I could say is you better get that. If you do that, you should have that Lysol laundry additive stuff put in there to kill whatever. But yeah, time out on the weekend, you know. Hope you get a little bit of a night out, maybe a cookout, you know, and do your chores and your house stuff, and then back to the grind. And I know there's some people out there saying, yeah, I love my job. It's great. You know, it's fun. I got a lot of friends at work and stuff like that. That's true. It's true. I always liked my job. I liked all my jobs. If I didn't like a job, I quit. I was never fired from a job my entire life. I left a bunch of jobs because I was usually the guy in charge or close to it. And I usually had made my position obsolete because, like I said, I was getting back to this idea of efficiency. And I can't stand to see people, they do repetitive tasks and they don't come up with a way to make it better. Like, yes, I'll give you an example, and yeah, I'm tooting my own horn because why not? It's my show. Let's let.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Let's let her say that, just to remind you. Yesterday, I got a thing that I had ordered on Amazon or one of those places. And it was a chain, like a pull chain. The kind of pull chain you'd see on an old-fashioned light, that you'd pull down, turn on the light. Do you ever see those? Some people have never seen those things, right? Well, anyway, in my bar, I had that bar light, it's a neon bar light. And the chain on it was like broken off because it used to have like a string on it or something, from when I got it. Because that bar light actually was in a bar I used to go to, and that was in there for years. I'm surprised the neon's still working. Now that I talk about it, it probably won't work. But neon lasts like really long time. Anyway, so I get tired of trying to fish my fingers up into this thing to turn this bar light on. So I bought a chain. They still sell them. I looked pull chain up. And I don't know, it was like $4 or something. I actually got 2 of them, and they're really long. So I hooked that up, came yesterday, and I hooked it up. So now I don't have to fish for that chain anymore. And some people look at that like, ridiculous thing to say. Who cares? It's a time-saving thing. I got one of those Echo Dot things, voice assistants. Can't say the name because it's next door in my bar, and then it'll be like confused. Well, I got one of these things. I actually brought it out here. I'll show you. See it? It's a smart plug. And so now I was a semi-pain hooking it up, because you had to put in your Wi-Fi and all this kind of stuff in it. But now I can say to my voice assistant, because I get up at night once or twice, go to the restroom, bathroom, whatever you want to call it. And it's dark. So I could say, turn on the light. And it turns on this light for me. I have a brighter light. Next to my nightstand, I have a brighter light that's like kind of a reading light. But I have this dimmer thing that's like one of these Himalayan salt type of lights. It's just like it's dimmer and it's warmer and it's not going to like mess with your mind to put you in the waking mode. The body has this thing about light, your sleep cycle or whatever. There's some scientific term for it, but I'm not going to get into that. Can't think of it offhand. So I got one of those things. It wasn't expensive at all, relatively. So now all I have to do is say is turn on the light. I do things like that, And they may sound insignificant, and if I sit here and think, I could probably think of a lot of stuff. It's like I showed you the other day I got a cheap Dollar Tree set of Christmas lights, last December or something. The Dollar Tree, $1. And I hooked them under my keyboard because I get up early in the morning and it's dark down here. And you can't see the keys, especially when I'm writing a book or something. Because if I'm not doing this show, and I don't know how longer this show is going to last, I may eventually just, sometimes you just say everything and it's over. I've already got a couple of hundred episodes. It's like, it becomes an archive for things. Maybe I'll index them, maybe I won't. It's like this year's if I do finish this 10th book, it's like 10 books. Okay, I'm done. It's like I wrote 50 songs. It's like 50 songs. Okay, come on, I'm done. I mean, it's not to say I won't do another video. I won't write another book. I won't write another song. I won't write another essay. I won't, create another, contraption. But, you do a thing and you complete it. It becomes, that's how my life is. I also have a speaker in my WC downstairs, what someone would call a half bath. The headphones squeezing in on these cheap, broken, geeked out reading glasses is like digging into my ear. So I finally found a volume switch because the speaker, I have when I'm playing music in my bar and I have to go use the restroom, I put a speaker in there so that, whether it's me or somebody visiting or something, you don't, or if I had the TV on and that's hooked up to the sound system, you could use the restroom and you're not going to miss, the music's still playing or whatever the thing is still in there. But the problem is in the bar, I tend to play music very loud, right? Very loud. I mean, I'm partying. I love music. Music is a big part of my life. And I'm going to turn it down every time if I have to go to the bathroom or somebody has to go to the bathroom. So it's a small room, this little WC. And so I've got a speaker in there, and even though it's a small speaker, it's like in that small room, it's like ear-splitting Loudenboomer, all right? So I finally, because I tried to use like a ceiling fan or a standard resistor, volume, not volume control, but light, dimmer switch. And because it's set for a higher wattage voltage, it didn't work, right? It just wouldn't, So I found this, it's not the ideal, but I found like a pack of 3. I don't know what I'm going to do with the other 2. But at least I got it to the point, and it's not perfect. It's not like I can control the volume like gradually up, gradually down. But it's like you can touch it enough to take it down. It's like almost like 3 little levels, but you have to be subtle. So I just set it to a little lower level. So when you go in the bathroom, you're going to hear the music, but it's just not going to be blaring in your ears, right? Blow you away. And it's done. Done is done. And so I'm always doing things like that. And so the idea is that, some of these things are just for comfort, but other things are to make life easier and to improve upon things so that you don't have to waste time on And so when you take all of these things, in my favorite word, in the aggregate, right? Such as my being able to turn on, like I have lights, I'll do it right now. I just turned off a bunch of my tiki lights across the room because it's 8:22 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the former United States. And there's no need for lights in here. You can see this, even though it's black and white, things have brightened up. I don't even think I necessarily, well, kind of still might need this just for showbiz purposes. Stage lighting. But I just turned those lights off across the room right here from a remote switch. And, and these are the things I do. So whenever I'm trying, I don't just wait. I don't like to do repetitive tasks. And that's why in jobs I've always left work and I've left the place in better shape, but I've usually made my position nearly obsolete. And I'm sure inevitably some bureaucratic type of person came in, took my position, and somehow got it out of control. You know what I mean? But I mean, literally, there were several jobs that I left, gave my 2 or 3 weeks notice to, because I was basically going into work, doing a once over of what was happening that day, going into my office and putting my feet up on my desk and waiting till lunchtime and going out to lunch. And sometimes I would go to an afternoon, like in New York City. I would go to afternoon. I'd watch a movie in the middle of the afternoon, come back to work, check on the progress of everything, make sure everything was running like a fine oiled machine, hang out for another hour or so, and then go home. And that wasn't me like not doing my job. That was me getting accolades and, and comments from people saying, man, this department you're running is really doing well. So, this is the kind of thing. And we don't see that today with functionally illiterate people. We don't see it with our infrastructure. It just falls apart. They're not making improvements. The previous generation isn't improving upon the next. Instead, we're de-evolving because of obsession with devices that may not exist if the power grid goes down. And what are you going to do when you can't text somebody, right? It's like all these, what are you going to do when, all your photos are gone, when the cloud, you can't access the cloud? And think about that, right? Like I say, the Romans had toilets, but, the early part of the last century in the U.S., they had outhouses. 2,000 years later. It happens. That's the way civilization is. It's one big cycle. Everything's a cycle. It's a cycle of life. And you need to build upon the previous civilization. That's what it's all about. Or this previous generation, I should say, but civilization as well. And that's how these are the end times, to use that word that some people may see as religious connotations. But it's the end times. Civilization has fallen. The U.S., this is the former United States. Western civilization has fallen. And what you see going on, everybody's taking a time out because it's the weekend. Nobody's watching the show. Nobody will watch it. But, just look around. Everything's falling apart. And the media and corporatocracy is hiding this stuff from you. Like nobody's really talking about this unrest in South Africa and other parts of the world. They'll just sensationalize some kind of thing here or there that they could use to keep pushing their own fear-mongering things. Right? So, yeah, it's a whacked out, functionally illiterate society. And that's why nobody watches this show. Because they don't want the truth. But the thing is, I don't sit here and scare people. I sit here and try to share things I've done. And I'm not talking about a pull switch. I've talked about other things. But the idea that you can do things, I mean, great solar stuff back here, that has this Jackery thing that's running the on-air light up here and powering, I've given you all these ideas, all of these, ways of doing it. And you can go to my website and find all of this stuff. And I've talked about it. But I'll talk about it and I'll really get into it and explain the usage and why it's good for you. And I'll get 2 views. And then I'll scan YouTube and I'll see somebody did a half-assed job of explaining one of these things and they've got 57,000 views. It's because why? You tell me. It's because people don't want to see themselves, They don't want to see the truth. They don't want to look at themselves in the mirror and understand like what's going on. They don't want to question authority. They don't want to be defiant, for their own safety and the safety of their families. And when I say defiance, again, I'm saying, like civil disobedience in the sense of Thoreau, non-violence, in the sense of Gandhi, all right? The successful movements of people, all right? You don't just listen to an authority figure, right? Because they are given a title of authority figure. You basically listen to what people like me are saying, that there's a couple of thousand people who are trying to tell 8 billion people how to live and what to do, but yet these people have yachts and private jets and chateaus and have already figured out how to hide their money, in these various tax shelters in different countries without extradition, and where their money's going to be safe and their power is going to be preserved, power and wealth. Anyway, that's the end of this show. Thanks for watching. Visit TonyCaravanLive.com. Get a shirt. You don't know what you don't know. Everything you know is wrong. Then what? Game over. Those kind of shirts. Visit GreatSolarStuff.com. There's links to that at TonyCaravanLive.com. All kinds of stuff. Check it out.